Kundalini is this esoteric topic that is getting more and more popular in the spiritual communities due to its amazing awakenings, profound realizations, and the upgrade of the nervous system. And yet it is often misunderstood. So I want to clear up what Kundalini is, what is a Kundalini awakening, and the foundations to what it is and how to awaken it, and how to manage once it is awakened. So what is Kundalini? Kundalini is a concept from the ancient yoga traditions of India, describing a dormant life force energy that rests at the base of the spine within every human being. Often symbolized as a coiled serpent, this energy is said to rise through the central channel of the body when awakened, activating the chakras and expanding awareness, perception, and consciousness. Kundalini is not just energy, it is a pathway and movement of your own consciousness becoming aware of itself. An inner awakening that leads to clarity, transformation, and realization of one's true nature and in unity with all of life. Across cultures and mystical traditions, this energy has been described in so many ways. While the language differs, the experience points to the same fundamental process of inner transformation and rising consciousness. While in the yoga tradition, like Kundalini Yoga, they have a comprehensive science that explains how to awaken this energy. So what is Kundalini and a Kundalini awakening? Well, we can simply say it's a bioneurological upgrade of the nervous system. And so the purpose of a Kundalini awakening is the shift from third density consciousness to fourth density consciousness, awakening to Christ consciousness, unity consciousness, and opening the green ray body of the heart chakra. But what is really confused by most people is that people really think Kundalini is this subsection of energy. But when we look at Kundalini, which the word comes from Sanskrit, we can see that Kund means pit, cavity, or womb. So what Kundalini really is this pit of dormant energy waiting at the base of the spine. And once awakened, you are then allowed all this energy to flow in the system. So now let's first take a look at the origins of Kundalini so we understand where it came from. So the exact origins of Kundalini Yoga is unknown. It's widely understood that the science of awakening dates back over 5,000 years. The sacred stories of Shakti and Shiva, the divine feminine and the divine masculine, is how this transformation is told in these traditions. Shakti, the feminine force of creation, is the power that gives life to the universe and dwells within it. In the myth, the gods call upon Shakti to incarnate into the world as a woman in order to awaken Shiva, her divine counterpart, who has fallen into deep yogic trance atop Mount Kailash. Without his feminine counterpart, Shiva cannot act in the world. In Hindu philosophy, the masculine god represents the absolute, Brahman, pure consciousness, while the feminine represents manifestation, the dynamic force that moves through space and time. And so Shakti agrees to help, but makes a condition. She will only enter the world if she is honored and seen as the divine goddess she truly is. If the world continues to dishonor the feminine, she promises to leave immediately, knowing the time is not yet ripe for her full manifestation. The gods agree, and so she incarnates as Sati. She grows up and eventually unites with Shiva, drawing him out of his trance and back into the world. But over time, the world fails to uphold its promise. Shakti, like many women, is dishonored, treated as property and objectified by men. In response, she awakens her inner fire, leaves her earthly body, and vows never to return until humanity is ready to revere the feminine. Yet, before she leaves, she makes a sacred promise to the gods. She will hide herself within all human beings, coiled at the base of the spine, in the Muladhara chakra, and in those who truly honor the goddess and awaken their inner awareness, she will rise again, leading them upwards into the divine union with Shiva at the crown. This myth is how the ancient Indians understood the phenomena of Kundalini. So first, before we get in depth about what Kundalini is and the Kundalini awakening, there are certain types of Kundalini awakenings that are often talked about. So first, there's spontaneous awakenings. When the energy is suddenly blasted through the system, often without any formal prior spiritual practice. This is a more rare awakening, but has been seen throughout history happening. There's also a partial awakening where the Kundalini is beginning to rise, but does not fully open the crown and break the cosmic egg. And so this is where most people who are in a Kundalini awakening or have done Kundalini practices are at, where they've had Kundalini starting to move up the spine, burn old karmas, and dissolve illusions, but it has not fully awakened in their body like the full Kundalini awakening has, where it is fully integrated in the body and it is now up to you to continue this flow. So what makes you have these certain type of awakenings, and also how you experience the Kundalini awakening, is really due to your karmic load. I mean, this determines, is this awakening a divinely blissful experience, or are you having a lot of die-offs, a lot of depression states, a lot of killing off of your old selves, and a lot of low negative energy being experienced. And this is all really determined through your karmic load. So let's now get into really the meat of this content. What is Kundalini and how to awaken it? So first, it is described as the coiled serpent. At the base of the spine, it's usually referred to being coiled 3.5 times at the Muladhara, at the base of the spine. Why it's represented as the coiled serpent is that if you've ever felt the Kundalini rising up the spine, it'll feel like this warm snake-like movement going up the spine, as well as the understanding that it's a transformational energy, and so like a snake sheds its skin, you are shedding your skin. And this is really the main purpose of Kundalini, of Shakti, the feminine energy, rising up from the Muladhara to the crown chakra, is to shed your skin, to dissolve all these illusions, and it really feels like this fiery burning transformation within. So now let's talk about the nadis, the three central energetic channels. These three energetic channels are the primary nadis that Kundalini really works upon. It's the primary nadis of your energetic body. And so this is what really causes that snake-like feeling, as the Pingala and Ida, the spiraling energy channels, that every time they meet, a chakra, one of the main central chakra points occurs, really creates that serpent-like feeling. So the Pingala and Ida are the yin and yang channels of this experience of your energetic body, with the Pingala being the masculine sun fire energy that connects to the masculine side of the body, of the brain, with the Ida being the feminine yin moon energy connecting to the feminine side of the body and brain. They go from the base of the spine at the Muladhara chakra all the way up to the third eye and even to the crown. This is where the Kundalini is really felt, is this snake-like pattern as it moves through the Ida and Pingala, going up through each of the chakra points. Now the Sushumna Nadi, the central Nadi, is a very important one also in regards to just the energetic body, but the Kundalini awakening as well. Because as the Ida and Pingala are awakening and burning through and dissolving these illusions in the chakras, the Sushumna allows more of this energy to flow through the central channel. And Kundalini yoga and science is when this energy of Kundalini makes its way through the Sushumna all the way from the base of the spine to the crown, is when the full Kundalini awakening occurs. Now to touch upon this a little more, there are said to be 72,000 nadis, and so you can see anytime a nadi intersects, there is a chakra point. So there are a lot more than 7 chakras and a lot more than those 3 central nadis. But when we're talking about the science of Kundalini, and to make it simple for most people, we really only focus on the 3 central nadis. The chakras, like I just said, occur when the nadis intersect, and we really only are, when people are talking about the chakras, they're really only talking about the 7 central chakras right here, especially in regards to the Kundalini awakening, as these are the 7 major chakras, but also the 7 chakras that you really experience and go through when you're talking about the central nadis of the Ida and Pingala and the Sushumna. And so really understanding these chakras and understanding the roles they play in the body is very important in the Kundalini symptoms. So first, before we get more in depth about each chakra, I want to explain these images I have. First, we can look on the image on the right, how you can see that these chakras, the 7 central chakras, where they locate in the nervous system and how they associate to nerve plexuses in the nervous system and the spine. I think most people in the scientific world and the materials world kind of dismiss the chakra systems, but when you look at this correlation right here, you can see how the nervous system acts very one-to-one to these chakra systems, to these energy centers, these extrasensory perceptions of your experience, as these are really like mini minds in your experience. And then an image on the left is kind of showing the masculine and feminine side of each energies, and also the way they spin and how they're not just moving out in the front but also in the back. So the crown and root spin downwards and upwards from the base of the spine to the top of the spine, and then all the other middle chakras spin both front and out. And then if you look at the throat chakra, when a chakra is blocked, you can see there is not really this spinning, this moving of energy outwards, and it's kept inwards. And then if we look on this right, while this is mostly accurate, there is some errors. This kind of shows which ways the chakras spin depending on the gender. So the root chakra being a masculine chakra, the sacral being a feminine, this is incorrect on this image, the solar plexus being masculine, the heart being feminine, the throat being masculine, the third eye being feminine, and the crown being both masculine and feminine. And you can kind of see in this image, depending on if you're a male or a female, the spin of the chakra will be different. While it does spin both ways, it predominantly will spin one way depending on your gender. Now, to go a little deeper into each chakra, we can understand that the Kundalini is going through each of these chakras and dissolving a bunch of false illusions and false narratives in each of these chakra experience, each in these stored experience. And really, especially in regards to the bottom 3 chakras. So starting at the base of the spine, where the Kundalini resides, at the Muladhara, this is the chakra represented by survival, by groundedness. It also rules the illusionary ideas of fear, lack, and any survival instincts. This is also represented with the earth element. It's correlated with the earth element. And so this is the grounding energy, and we'll look deeper into what that means later in this video. And so when Shakti is going through this energy center and burning through the illusions, really having to come face to face with a lot of your primal fears, such as death and things that you're scared of. This is why most people don't even have a Kundalini awakening or even start the Kundalini awakening process, because you have to jump through, a lot of hurdles to get over your primal fears, such as death. But as soon as you start to awaken your Kundalini, awaken to the illusion of death and lack and fear, you will make your way up to the sacral chakra, which governs creativity and sexuality. The illusion that this one will have to overcome is stuff like attachment and the wasting of sexual energy are 2 huge ones that the sacral chakra really touch upon. Attachment to the material world, attachment to ideas and concepts. This is really governs a lot of the depression and sadness that people have, because all of depression and sadness is stemming from the attachment to that reality, that false belief. And so as Shakti burns through these illusions, you really get that Buddhist download of non-attachment. The sacral chakra is also associated with the water element, with creativity and flow. And so as Shakti burns through all of these, you make your way up to the solar plexus, which governs the ego, which governs free will, which governs your ability to create in this world. And so like it has its positive side, it also has its negatives. And so the Shakti will be burning through stuff like control, anger, and all these negative beliefs associated with anger and control, as the solar plexus is associated with fire and the ego, both being the goods and bads of the ego. And these three bottom chakras are really the only three chakras you really are working through in regards to the mental emotional capacity, because all three of these are the third density material chakras and really play into the role of the Maya, the illusion, through the idea of the ego of separation through lack, attachment, and control. And so as Shakti is burning through this illusion of Maya, you get to the heart chakra, which governs love, courage, and negatively will deal with stuff like heartbreak and grief. The heart chakra is also associated with the air element, the solar plexus being associated with the fire, if I didn't already say that. Heart is associated with the air element because it's the bridge between the cosmic energies of the upper chakras and the lower chakras of the earthly elements of earth, water, and fire. And so as Shakti moves from the heart and moves upwards to the throat, we start to experience these higher spiritual experiences and these psychic abilities, especially as we move through the bridge of the heart into the upper chakras. The throat really governs authentic expression, and so its negative side would be not being able to authentically express. And so the truth really matters when it comes through the throat chakra. And so not being able to express yourself fully, becoming authentic, is really how Shakti can move upwards further from the throat chakra, this element of plasma, this element of vibration, up to the third eye. The third eye chakra really is the representation of duality, of perception, of intuition. A lot of spiritual communities always talk about the third eye for good reasons, but to not have it balanced with all the other chakras is really the main issue that most people have. And understanding that the negative side of the third eye is kind of confusion, unclear perception. This is why, like, a calcified pineal, the brain is not working as clearly, hormones are not working as clearly, you are unclear in your perception, but when the third eye or the pineal gland is decalcified, and when it is clear, you kind of see reality more clearly. This is also associated with the sixth sense, which I won't get into too much in depth in this video, but goes really deep with all these psychic abilities. And so as Shakti has moved all the way up to the third eye, it's still not finished and has to get to the crown chakra. Even though a lot of people always talked about moving energy to the third eye, to really have a full Kundalini awakening, it has to go through the crown and break through the crown, fully opening it. And so the crown chakra is really associated with connection, with unity, and negatively it would be associated with disconnect from reality. And so the element of this would be really like the Tao, Akasha, the full universe. So that was a quick overview of what the chakras are. If you want to go a little bit deeper in each of these, I have other videos that talk about these chakras. But I wanted to give a base view of what these things are, especially as Shakti moves up through them and is dissolving a lot of these stuck energies that are in these chakras and have to clear them out. So when we're talking about Kundalini, we have to talk about bliss, because this experience is very blissful. In fact, just like how pleasurable reproduction or orgasm is evolutionary for us to continue to reproduce, spiritually and also in this spiritual evolution, going deeper on the path creates more bliss and ecstasy to invite us to push towards evolution. So the same evolutionary process that got us to reproduce is kind of the same evolutionary process happening spiritually with bliss. As you go deeper into yourself, as you awaken the Kundalini, the more blissful your experience will be. This can be easily described through the law of one's density models. So from third density, from solar plexus ego awareness to fourth density consciousness to heart chakra awareness. This allows for more bliss, and so more energy can be consumed and burned. This is kind of the whole role of the Kundalini awakening process, is to move from third density to fourth density to allow the nervous system to receive more energy, to use more energy, which is also allowing more bliss. In a third density conscious body, feeling all these emotions, feeling bliss, really burns energy really fast. And so having blissful experiences really are shorter. They peak really fast and come down really fast. But in a fourth density body, one that had a Kundalini awakening, can really stay in that blissful experience and don't really have the come downs if properly cultivated. Why this was rare before, it was because Earth itself has now shifted from a third density conscious planet to fourth density. And so as the Earth's electromagnetic field is shifting into this higher density experience, we are Earth, so we are also shifting to this experience. And now we're going to have a lot more people just have these Kundalini awakenings, or at least the beginnings of these Kundalini awakening symptoms, as we, the people of Earth, are also shifting with it. The last thing I really want to touch upon bliss is that you got to understand what bliss truly is, which is bliss is any emotion fully felt. And so, like many times when people are talking about Kundalini awakenings, there's two really big ideas behind the Kundalini awakening. Some people really experience these high ecstasies, mystical states, have this loving experience, but sometimes they also have these deep depressions, these deep negative emotions, these deep harsh realities crashing upon themselves. And that's because bliss is feeling any emotion fully. This is both the negative and positive emotions. There's nothing inherently wrong with the negative emotions as much as there's nothing wrong with the positive emotions. And so really, we can say it's the karmic load that how you experience the Kundalini awakening, but really you are feeling bliss if you're feeling that depression, those negative emotions to fullest extent. And that is what fourth density conscious body really acts like. You are fully feeling still the negative emotions, but you're fully feeling it, so you're able to transmute energy more appropriately, which is the power of the human experience. We've talked a lot about the basics of Kundalini, but how do we awaken it? So this divine feminine force, this pure creative potential, is just waiting to be awakened at the base of the spine. So through spiritual effort like yoga, meditation, qigong, kriya, deep inner work, etc., Kundalini begins to stir. This means that through spiritual effort, this Kundalini awakening is really already started to occur. But as it awakens, this energy rises up the spine, activating and purifying each of the chakras along its path, like a serpent uncoiling and ascending towards the crown. This is kind of what we've been touching upon with all the chakra systems. And so you do not force Kundalini upwards, you prepare the body, the temple, and it rises naturally. This is one of the things I think most people often overlooked, especially in a lot of these Western ideas of Kundalini and awakening the Kundalini. They're really trying to just force this energy up, which is really not how it works. This is how you can get into spiritual psychosis really well, how you can burn your third eye, and how you can have an unpleasant Kundalini awakening experience is by trying to force it. But really what you want to do is just clear the body, clear the channels, clear the chakras, and the Kundalini will naturally rise once the temple is clean, once the body is clean. Another huge part about awakening Kundalini is to talk about sexual energy, because sexual energy is creative energy, is the spiritual currency for Shakti to use. So, in Kundalini traditions, this energy can be redirected upwards for transformation. This is talked a lot about in the tantric traditions, as well as in traditional Chinese medicine traditions, which we won't really get into more in depth in this video, but it will be crucial to learn, especially after a Kundalini awakening and during the process of a Kundalini awakening, really understanding this energy moving up the spine. So when unconscious, it seeks only release, but when conscious, it can become fuel for awakening. So this is really crucial, understanding that like you can kind of see sexual energy as like spiritual currency for Shakti, as this creative energy, this sexual energy, which can create life, something that we have no idea scientifically how to understand that truly. Shakti, when used consciously and not unconsciously, can kind of use that sexual energy in a way to move herself upwards and start dissolving these illusions. So the more conscious you use your sexual energy, the better for this transformation. This is why it's very common for men. We talk about sexual retention a lot. Let's look at this image on the right first, where it shows the turning the wheels. This is from traditional Chinese medicine with the dantians, the lower, middle, and upper, as well as the sexual energy at the bottom. As the wheel of energy turns, it moves up through the microcosmic orbit, up the spine, and also back down, and creating this vortex, which we'll talk about later in this video, and the importance of this. This is also called the Kundalini circuit. Let's go to this image to the left, this golden state of preservation of energy for men. This is also from traditional Chinese medicine. I think this is a really important one, especially for men, to talk about, especially when we talk about Kundalini energy, because when we talk about semen retention, a lot of times we just talk like, hey, just stop, ejaculating, stop releasing. But we have to understand that we are also going through sexual cycles, kind of just like in a different way, but in a natural cycle like the women have with their menstrual cycle. And so depending on the age, this is a generalization of the interval between ejaculations that should occur, but depending on the age of the men, this is kind of the general days of the cycle that occurs. And so this is not to release every 4 days if you're in the age range of 20 to 30, but really every 4 days you should learn to use your sexual energy and move it up the spine without releasing it outwards. There's a lot of practices that you can learn. We won't really touch upon them in this presentation, but stuff like microcosmic orbit is a really good one. The bandhas is a really essential one. And other kriyas are very great ways to move this energy and not have it ejaculate. So the last thing I want to touch upon this is we can kind of look at unconscious release as the same way we see animal reproducing. Like when you're in nature and you see an animal reproduce, you don't really have any qualms with that happening, the natural process happening. And it should be kind of the same way when you talk about releasing externally in ejaculation. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a different level of consciousness being played out. And so you can kind of think of it as like third density consciousness versus fourth density consciousness, which is using sexual energy more consciously. You can still create babies in fourth density consciousness. We still want to participate in this world, but using it consciously rather than unconsciously, seeking for lust and these pleasures rather than co-creating some experience for higher conscious awakenings are two completely different scales when it comes to the sexual energy use. And also, it is also very, with this whole Kundalini awakening, there are a lot of texts, as there's two paths in Tantra, one that involves a lot of sexual activity and one that does not. And the path with a lot of sexual activity talks a lot about how sexual transmutation really helps energy release and expand consciousness and helps the Kundalini energy move. So signs of awakenings. So physical symptoms can really feel like energy or heat moving through the spine, especially in that snake-like pattern. Tingling or vibration in the body, sometimes this somatic release. Pressure in the head, forehead, or the crown, and changes in sleep patterns. Heightened sensitivity to light, sounds, and other senses is huge. and surges of energy or fatigue, especially with these die-offs. Fatigue can be common. Really touching upon that somatic release, you'll see a lot of times when talked about Kundalini awakenings, or you're doing these certain breath works and stuff, you see these people's bodies shaking, vigorously. This is what I kind of mean by somatic release, is that energy is being poured out into the system to really transmute energy, to awaken a lot of dead spots in the body, unconscious spots in the body. And so you'll have a lot of these somatic releases. It's like the shedding of the skin of the snake happening in the body. Emotional symptoms can be like old emotions surfacing to be released, sudden crying or laughter, increased empathy and sensitivity, periods of fear or anxiety, deep peace or bliss states. I mean, you're going to go through all the emotions, all the bliss. When you're going through a Kundalini awakening, you must transmute and really dissolve all illusions and feel all emotions to have this awakening. So the emotional symptoms will be a very wide range of experience, but very heightened is the key word for that. Mental symptoms can be the expanded awareness, heightened intuition, increased clarity or insight, the feeling of detaching from old identities, and the desire for truth and authenticity. Some more signs of this awakening would be the increasing of synchronicities. So this is like meaningful coincidences, feeling guided by life, and right people lessons appear at key times. So like a common one is like seeing angel numbers appear more frequently, or really just seeing synchronicities appear more and more often until really synchronicities are every moment. You kind of just see every moment as a miracle because it truly is. Inner silence, natural stillness is huge. Less mental noise and peace without external reason. I mean, you can't really separate all this Kundalini awakening with meditation. And so really getting into that meditative state more frequently, more common, is another great sign of an awakening. And then heart opening is another huge one. I mean, we're talking about moving from third density to fourth density, from solar plexus to heart chakra. So having an activated heart, an opened heart, is huge. So this is increased compassion, spontaneous love for others, great empathy and forgiveness, and feeling connected to life. I think one of my favorite little stories that kind of show this is from Ram Dass, where he talks about, after really coming to these realizations and awakenings, you're walking down the street and you see someone and you're just so fully, unconditionally in love with that person, even though you've never met them. And you just want to know everything about them. You want to talk to them forever. You're just getting really intimate with this person, but life's going on. They gotta go. They're done. They got something to go do. They walk past and you're like, wow, you could have spent a lifetime with them. And then 2 seconds later, you walk by someone else and you kind of have that same interaction, and you're just so unconditionally in love with reality, with everything around you. Purpose activation is another huge one when it comes to Kundalini awakening. So this is the desire to serve, needing to create something meaningful, and stronger pull towards your dharma and your path. A lot of times before a Kundalini awakening, you're kind of still stuck in that spiritual seeking experience. You don't really know which direction to go and to push towards. And one of the huge things about Kundalini awakening is, even if you don't realize all these symptoms beforehand, if you have found your dharma, your path, your purpose, it's a very strong sign that you've had your Kundalini awakening. And so the Kundalini awakening process can really help you towards your dharma, towards figuring out your dharma, and towards the path you want to take in your life. Desiring to serve is huge. I mean, we're talking about there's two real splits in consciousness and duality, and it's service to self and service to others. And so when you're really talking about this whole Kundalini awakening process, it's really this desire to serve others, this service to others. Well, it can get very paradoxical quickly in this metaphysical world, because serving others is serving yourself. It's really, are you aligned with the ego and the ideas of separation, or are you aligned with life, unity, and the service to others. So another few of these energetic signs of awakening is inner conjunction. This energetic lightning bolt that happens in the body is really balancing the masculine and feminine energies. The grantes, which are energetic knots being released, so old fears surfacing and dissolving, emotional knots unraveling, identity attachments weakening, and sudden clarity after inner tension. And then the piercing of the cosmic egg, also the feeling of the crown chakra opening, which is really just this breaking through the illusion of separation, consciousness expanding beyond personal identity. Before we go more in depth about some of this energetic signs and some of this Kundalini awakening experience, we really have to go and talk about the dark night of the soul and die-offs. This is a really huge experience in the Kundalini awakening. First, we'll talk about dark night of the soul. So the hero's journey always travels through the underworld. This is an archetypical experience for all people on the spiritual path, the hero's journey. So I have a picture of Odysseus in Hades. This is from the story, the Odyssey. It's just a representation of how all the epics, all the hero's journeys, they always travel into the underworld, into hell, before they become the better hero afterwards. And so most people really go through this depressive, this harsh time in their life before they have a spiritual awakening or a Kundalini awakening. This is very archetypically true. Everyone I've talked to always kind of has this case, and if they didn't have it quite like this, they were probably stuck in a very egotistical mindset right before their spiritual awakening. And so another great metaphor for this is that the tree that reaches for heaven must have its roots in hell. This is a great metaphor that really explains stuff like the macrocosm is the microcosm, but also this whole dark night of the soul, as you kind of need to have your roots in hell. You need to see the depths of hell so that you can reach for the heights of heaven. And, we're not just raising our vibration, we're expanding our consciousness. So you gotta have to experience both. This is why bliss is any emotion fully felt. Another huge concept that we really need to talk about when we're talking about Kundalini awakenings is die-offs. So a die-off is when old identities are being stripped away. This can occur throughout the whole Kundalini awakening experience. This can occur when the energy really drops, when energy can feel really low. This may appear as endings, setbacks, purging, depression, trauma activation, or internal chaos. And so we really want to manage our energy properly so that we do not have die-offs. And this doesn't not mean that your Kundalini awakening is done or like you've failed of any sort, but this is a common occurrence when you are in a Kundalini awakening experience. And so we'll touch upon how to manage the whole Kundalini awakening experience so that we can prevent die-offs. But know that if it does happen, it's just temporary and you're just really stripping away these old identities. And really be grateful that Shakti is moving through you and that you can have these identities be stripped away so you can be more of your true self. So the inner conjunction. This is one of the craziest metaphysical experience that one can have, especially during this Kundalini awakening. It feels like a lightning bolt strikes from the crown all the way to the root, really polarizing your experience, really giving you the masculine and feminine balance of the energies. Some say it's the beginning of the entire process. I definitely see why people can say this. This is definitely a very obvious experience to be had, and after that you probably start to experience a lot more of the other energetic symptoms and other symptoms. But really, I think this is not fully accurate. I think the Kundalini awakening is happening probably way before this. Maybe it's just not perceptive, especially if you are already doing spiritual practices. You are starting to stir the Kundalini. But this is a very significant experience. You can also potentially say that this is when one of the grantes, the energetic knots, kind of gets untied, and then the energy system is on a new level, and so you kind of have this energy spike appear in your system. And so the upward and downward spiraling energies meet at the root chakra. So this is kind of just talking about like electromagnetically, the positive and negative are kind of, the positive and negative energies are now spiraling together, creating this infinite energy, and really now meeting at the root chakra, really starting this movement of energy, such as like the microcosmic orbit. The head and crown feels hot to the touch. So after this lightning bolt experience, the head and crown will feel hot to the touch. And then also right after, it can feel, your whole body can feel a little cold, just because you just had like a giant energetic release. And you'll feel very warm. In my experience, it really opened up my perception of energy, chi, my clairvoyance, and yeah, really gave a lot of people talk about the interconjunction in regards to seeing and feeling all the nadis and all the energetic pathways, all the chakras. It's a very intense experience, very blissful. Not really, I can't really say anything negative about it. It's an amazing experience, and we'll talk a little bit more about that type of experience later in this presentation. But there's also one other thing about interconjunctions that we can talk about, which is, it's called Shakti Pa, which is from yoga, which is this transfer of spiritual energy from a guru. So guru can kind of do some sort of interconjunction to people where they transfer some spiritual energy, some of their life force energy into the crown, and kind of awakening these energies with like an interconjunction. I really don't suggest this unless you are with an actual guru. So now let's talk about granthis, the energetic knots that restrict the upward flow of Kundalini. Weirdly enough, I don't hear many people talk about the granthis too often, especially in Kundalini, even though it is written throughout all the texts and is a very significant aspect of the Kundalini awakening process. As the awakening deepens, these knots begin to loosen and dissolve. They represent attachments, fears, identity patterns, and unconscious conditionings. And so as the Kundalini is rising, you kind of are met at these like blockades of sorts that a lot of people are kind of confused about, like why isn't my energy rising more and more? And it's really due to these three energetic knots of the granthis. So we have the Brahma Granthi, which is really located around the root and sacral. This is associated to attachment to survival, fear, material identity, sensual fixation, and insecurity. So really once you dissolve all these things is when the knot is fully unraveled. Then we have the Vishnu Granthi, which is right below the heart, in between the solar plexus and the heart. And this is associated with emotional attachment, grief, relationship dependency, identity through love or pain, and difficulty letting go. And then we have the Rudra Granthi, which is located in between the third eye and crown, and is associated with ego identity, pride, attachment to beliefs, illusion of control, and the spiritual ego. So let's really understand what these Granthis mean. So Brahma Granthi binds consciousness to creation, Vishnu Granthi binds consciousness to preservation, and Rudra Granthi binds consciousness to identity and control. So Brahma means creator or creation, so represents the attachment to the material world and survival. Vishnu means preserver or sustainer, represents emotional attachment, relationship, and identity maintenance. And Rudra means fierce transformer and destroyer of illusions. This represents ego, pride, attachment to intellect, or spiritual identity. And so a lot of times when someone is having a Kundalini awakening experience, they kind of get stuck at some point of the energy system. Especially during the process of a Kundalini awakening, you can kind of feel this like made up linear experience of energy moving to certain chakra points. And where you're really getting caught up are on these granthis. The chakras are already all activated, and so it's really learning to unravel these energetic knots is how you allow Shakti, allow Kundalini to fully flow in your whole system, in the microcosmic orbit, in the Kundalini circuit. So I'm pretty amazed why this is often overlooked, even though it's in all the yogic text, because this is very important to understand where blockages really are in the experience. While I think it's an amazing framework to still look at the chakra system and unclearing it from that level, from an emotional, mental, physical level. I think understanding these granthis is also crucial for helping one go through a Kundalini awakening and helping others really process this whole experience. Now we have the cosmic egg. This one is also a very rarely talked about topic in Kundalini. I think just because of its nicheness of experience, and I think it's because a lot of times people haven't fully awakened their Kundalini in their whole body. So what the cosmic egg is what we're really talking about is the piercing of this cosmic egg and the unveiling of reality. So this is like when you get Kundalini all the way into the crown and it pierces the cosmic egg. So once there's enough energetic rise to the crown, once you've cleared the temple of the body up through the crown, and it can pierce the cosmic egg, which sits right above the crown, then the energetic yolk flows down, encompassing the whole body. This feels like an energetic novocaine. It's like this yolk substance going through your whole subtle body and really activating everything to a degree. This to me is the real signification of that you've had a full Kundalini awakening, and as the body is now integrating it and you're having that bioneurological upgrade of the nervous system is when the pierced of the cosmic egg happens. What yoga text and traditional Chinese texts really talk about is this Brahma Radra, which is the soft spot on the baby's head. So this is also at governing vessel 20. You can see in those pictures right here where it is located. This is kind of the center point of the crown and where the cosmic egg lays right on top of that. And it's pretty interesting that this is the soft spot on the baby's heads until a certain age where the bone eventually closes up. Super interesting. All right, now let's get a little more heady and talk about more parts of the subtle body and this whole energetic cycle of how Kundalini awakening actually works. And we got to talk about the nectar cycle. So the nectar cycle really is talking about Amrita, which is the Sanskrit word for the nectar of immortality. You know, every tradition kind of talks about this, you know, the fountain of youth being part of this. But this is really what metaphysically they're describing, not something external, but something that you actually internally produce in the energetic body. So we've talked about the sexual energy before. So when the sexual energy is moved up, it is actually converted into what we call Amrita. It is then digested into the lower dantian, the Agni of the stomach fire, to transform the energetic body and the nervous system. This is this milky nectar, honey-like substance that you will really feel in the back of the throat during this experience. It's still in the subtle body, but you can very much feel the sensation of this experience, especially as your body is getting upgraded through this dripping of the Amrita. What's another huge point to talk about the Amrita are these two chakra points, the Bindu and the Lalana chakra. Lalana is also referred to as Talu chakra. The Lalana chakra is the switching station between the throat chakra and the third eye chakra. And a lot of times this is where Amrita is either dropping down into the body, into the lower dantian, or is it moving into the third eye, into the brain? And another aspect to this is the Bindu and the causal chakra, which we'll get a little more into, is kind of where it is understood in yogic texts that where your concentration is where the Amrita is being flown into. So from the midbrain into the throat, into the Lalana chakra. And one huge way to really activate the Lalana chakra is through the Chachari Mudra, which is a tongue lock, which is very important tool to know and utilize during a Kundalini awakening. This is how you can switch it from going into the stomach or using it to experience it in the brain. You can kind of use the Chachari Mudra as one to really get you into the subconscious mind, into the back of the brain instead of the front of the brain. Or you can allow it to drip naturally into the lower dantian. Some say it can become wasteful, but I don't think there is any waste when it comes to the Amrita. If it just drops into the lower dantian, into the Agni fire, it's being transformed into the energy body and the nervous system. So let's talk about the Bindu and causal chakra. The Bindu is a subtle point associated with the origin, sound, and the seed of manifestation. The causal chakra is often described as a center behind or above the crown chakra. This is a very important chakra that's not often talked about, because really when people talk about the chakras, they really only talk about the 7 central. But this is one of a very important one, especially when you're talking about psychic abilities and also deeper meditative states and Kundalini awakening. So the causal chakra, kind of its place in the back of the head, same location of the crown, but further out. So it's not really in the physical body, it's right outside. And this is linked to leaving the body, astral projection, or out-of-body experiences. And when you see that ethereal tether link to your body, as you've probably seen in depictions of astral projection or out-of-body experience, or from your own personal experience, this is kind of that tether. This is what it's really associated to the Bindu and the causal chakra. But one thing that is kind of confusing about the Bindu is not really a chakra, but it is really just the point of your concentration. And a lot of times the Bindu is associated with the causal. So sometimes the causal is called the Bindu chakra, the midbrain, because that is, in a lot of cultures, the cave in which Brahma, in which the absolute intelligence resides. But once you've experienced non-duality and meditation to such degrees, you realize any sensation, any parts of your body is a Bindu. And this kind of gets really trippy to experience unless you understand. But what I mean by that is that any sensation can become a Bindu point, and you can kind of go deep within any sensation. You leave the body through any sensation, and it's just the level of concentration and awareness that you have. The Bindu is also sometimes linked with the dripping of the Amrita nectar in the advanced yogic teachings, as I said before. And the last thing I think I want to talk about in regards to the Bindu and the chakra is that, especially for stuff like astral projection and using the psychic abilities such as these, you can really experience the Bindu through the sensations, and it will feel in a lot of ways stuff like you're either going through this light tunnel, like you're going through hyperspace. This can be visually, you're going through this wind tunnel, or you can also auditorially hear it. So maybe it feels like you're in this wind turbine, or you're right next to a jet, very loud, just wind rushing. Sometimes in this state, you'll just hear people calling out your names, old memories popping up, anything to like stop you from fully traveling through the Bindu. You really have to be really good at using discernment and really understanding and surrendering to the experience so that you can leave the body, go into the void, into these crazy non-dual space, or into the astral realms. Sometimes there are other sensations, but those are the most common ones that I've come across and I hear most about the Bindu. So to really understand Kundalini, we have to understand a little bit more about the subtle energy body. And really, we got to understand that Kundalini is not a subsection of energy. I think this is really, really often misunderstood. A lot of people talk about like the Kundalini energy, which I wouldn't say is necessarily wrong in the way that they say it, but it's not accurate to how it actually works in the body. Kundalini is a transformational energy for sure, but really it's just that pit of reserved energy in the body. I mean, if you don't have a Kundalini awakening, you're still having all these energy systems running in your system, but the Kundalini really just activates this pool of energy, and 10 times, 100 times, infinitely times your energetic circuit after it is awakening. So it's really this reserved pit of energy at the base of the spine. So what you really need to understand is these subsections of energies. This is the simplest I can go of this framework, so you can understand that everyone already has these energies alive in their system, and Kundalini just awakens more of this energy. This three system through the Ayurvedic and Taoist traditions. So we have prana, tejas, or ojas, or in the Taoist it's shen, qi, and jing. So the qi in the body, the prana in the body, this is where it gets confusing really fast, is that in yoga they'll call all energy prana, but then it's also a subsection of prana. And the same with Taoists, they call all energy qi, but qi is also a subsection of qi itself. And so let's start at the top. So prana or shen is really the subsection of energy that is associated with the upper dantian and the third eye and crown chakra region. It's a very airy elemental subsection of this energy, and it's this light blue energy, and it really deals with perception and refinement. Then we have tejas and qi, which is associated with the middle dantian and the heart and the element of fire. This is kind of what most people feel when they're talking about prana or qi. They're really more talking about this, especially when you do the rubbing of the hands, feeling the energy of the body. They're talking about this subsection of energy. And then we have another subsection of ojas and jing, which is associated with the lower dantian, the hara chakra, which is the lower dantian, and it's associated with the earth and water element. This is like this clay-like energy. This is the basis of all your karma. It has a lot to do with your umbilical cord, your mother connection, a lot of your karma. And I don't want to go too deep into this, but I really wanted to make this clear so that you understand that Kundalini is really just awakening more of this energy in your body rather than just being its own separate energy. So to understand this even further, we must look at the Kundalini circuit. So just because you have awakened it does not mean it is over. I think this is the thing that most people don't understand about Kundalini awakening, even a full Kundalini awakening, is that they think you awaken it and it's over, but actually your awakening is now your responsibility with this upgraded energy body to circulate energy, or die-offs occur. So this is to go back onto die-offs, and why it's so important to really do these cultivating practices of energy and understanding the energetic body. So you can look at both of these images. On the image on the right is a more simple form of the Kundalini circuit. You can kind of see that it rises up and down the spine. One goes up and down the front or back of the spine. And this is really just what the TCM sciences call the microcosmic orbit. This is a way more a classical depiction of the microcosmic orbit on the left. When you're talking about Kundalini rising and the cycling of the Kundalini circuit, they're talking about the microcosmic orbit and these channels called the governing and conception channel, or Dumai and Rinmai, which is the front and back of the Kundalini circuit. So as energy is rising up and down the energy body, this is really important. When we're talking about Kundalini awakenings, we're always really talking about bringing energy up, which is very fair. We're trying to awaken and decalcify the pineal gland, awaken the third eye, really get this energy to the crown so we can have that full awakening. But it's very easy to bring energy up, and it's a lot harder to bring energy down. And I think this is the thing that is overlooked the most when we're talking about energy or Kundalini, is this bringing down of energy, of embodiment. And I think this Kundalini circuit, the microcosmic orbit, is the best introduction, best understanding needed for this. And it's because as you are wanting to bring energy up, you also want to bring it down, which is embodiment. Things like the Amrita that we touched upon helps with all this system. And before we continue, we need to talk about these 2 points, GV28 and CV1, which is the governing vessel 28 acupressure point, which is actually right behind the front 2 teeth, so like right above them on the gum, and the conception vessel 1 being the perineum. And so placing your tongue to press on the GV28 right above the front teeth on the gum and squeezing the perineum creates this energetic loop, like you're creating this energetic circuit from activating. So you create this Kundalini circuit from rolling and allow the energy to move. This is the microcosmic orbit. very essential tool for moving sexual energy, for moving Kundalini energy, for moving just energy in general. So, like we were just talking about some of these things that are not talked about in the Kundalini awakening, we also have this secret stage of Kundalini that I don't hear talked about too often, which is very confusing from my own personal experience. Which is, we talked about stuff like the causal chakra, which is outside of the 7 central chakras. We talked about embodying and bringing the energy down. And this is another crucial aspect of all this, which is bringing the energy down and activating the Earth Star chakra. So there are 2 other chakra points that are really essential when we're talking about the Kundalini system and also just the energetic body, and that are 2 chakra points 6 inches above and 6 inches below the physical body. 6 inches above being the soul star and 6 inches below being the Earth Star. If you look to the image on the right, you can see that the Ida and Pingala actually connect the Earth Star through the legs to the root chakra. So this is the earthly connection to the body through the legs. I mean, we can go super deep into the energetic anatomy into this and the physical anatomy into this, but we need to just simply understand that. And then in this middle image, you can kind of see all the chakras. You can see the Earth Star at the very bottom, the 7 central, even the lower dantian, the causal chakra, the soul star, and then we have the top one. Some people call it stellar gateway. I really just think about this as the Tao, outside of even your energetic body, just the universe itself. So true mastery is not escaping upwards, but harmonizing heaven and earth within the body, meeting at the middle and leading from the heart. I mean, this is awakening to the heart-based consciousness. As we are moving energy all the way up the crown, it's really this heart-mind coherence that we are dealing with, and this is what embodiment truly is. And so this secret stage that I think most people, even who've had crazy Kundalini awakening experiences, don't really have activation of these higher chakras like Soul Star or Earth Star chakras. I mean, whenever I had the Earth Star chakras, that's when I really felt embodied, when I really felt like the Kundalini awakening was truly over, because I was now able to circulate energy naturally. I mean, Kundalini, once you awaken the Kundalini, it's like this bubbling elevator of energy just always shooting up. And so without the negative polarization of the earth, bringing it back down into the system and creating this cycle of the microcosmic orbit. Now, this is a really important slide of how to manage Kundalini awakening. So classically in the yogic tradition, you always kind of would have a guru-student partnership. So really having someone who is trained in the Kundalini awakening experience and energy systems, obviously having their own Kundalini awakening experience is super crucial. Just to bounce off ideas, to make sure you're doing the appropriate stuff, and answer any questions, and have someone who's grounded in their energy help work at this is really huge. Granted, we are in a different time, so just having yourself in community is huge, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But really, this is important. This is why I'm not teaching any specific practices during this video, because it needs to be a lot more of a closer situation. I don't want to give this type of information that can become harmful to someone's lifestyle and experience without me being able to check up and doing all the specific things that I would suggest. Like some of the things that I will be talking about in this slide. So like holistic eating is a huge one, and one that I feel like is kind of overlooked. I mean, just making sure you're hydrating properly, getting actual alive, clean water, good electrolytes, especially during these like fiery experiences. I mean, your system's literally burning through karma and illusions, so hydration's huge. I know milk and raw milk especially for its electrolytes are really good. So if you're in a very heated situation in the Kundalini experience, I know raw milk has been suggested to help cool it down. But hydration in general would be a huge thing. So fruits also, it's huge. But we can also even look further into fruits, as they are really high in voltage, very high in life force energy, and so are tea and herbs. And so really focusing a lot more of our diet towards fruits, herbs, teas really benefit the flow of energy as well as this uprise of Kundalini awakening. And really, when you are dealing with high energetic experiences and really trying to cultivate energy, fruit fasting, eating way more on this vegan style really helps. I personally now only eat vegetarian and vegan, just to maintain my energy appropriately, especially after my Kundalini awakening. It didn't seem like any other choice. Granted, there's a lot of other great reasons why I did not kill animals. A holistic lifestyle is another huge one. So not just holistically eating, but how we're living is huge. So making sure you're grounding, getting sunlight, moving, and being in nature is huge. Uh, you know, People are scared of the sunlight, which is crazy because that is how we're getting all this light energy in our body, and then grounding as well. I mean, you're not going to be able to remove the oxidative stress in the body with the new sunlight if you're not grounding. So, I mean, this is the best antioxidant thing you can do, which is just getting your feet on the ground. And then movement, really good to express, authentically express the body, move the energy around, really embody it. And then obviously nature. I mean, there's so many benefits for just being in nature. So really having that holistic lifestyle, as well as, doing the meditative practices, really doing the embodiment practices. Now, plant medicine is one thing that some people really should skip over when they're talking about Kundalini awakening symptoms, but I don't want to skip over it because a lot of times when people are first really experiencing Kundalini symptoms or Kundalini awakening experiences, it's oftentimes with association to plant medicines or some type of psychedelic medicine. And that's because you're giving yourself a higher perception by, activating certain receptors and all sorts of things. And so while it can be beneficial in the experience, it can help the awakening process, it can help you realize that you're in the awakening process. I mean, I also would be I would use a lot of discernment when it comes to the plant medicines and psychedelic medicines, because the Kundalini awakening will make you way more sensitive to life, and especially plant medicines. These psychedelics amplify everything. So if you are already amplifying your whole life experience, psychedelics can get really intense really fast. So using them wisely with intention is huge. I wouldn't say not use them. Use them in your own discernment. But I don't want to say you should not use them. I don't think there's really evidence in my experience that will stop you from awakening Kundalini. That being said, if it stops you from doing the holistic lifestyle, eating, spiritual practice, if you're bypassing using it and not using it with intentions, obviously that will stop it. To also reiterate, cannabis, Santa Maria, as a really great plant medicine for this experience. I know a lot of times people will use Santa Maria, especially during a Kundalini awakening. It can help in a lot of ways. It's a very medicinal medicine, very watery medicine. It has a lot to do with all the chakras, meditation. Just use it wisely with intention, not every day. Use it as the medicine it is, and with all the other plant medicines the same. But really, I want to emphasize with cannabis, especially as it's becoming more legalized and more researched, how beneficial it is, especially in the cannabinoid systems, how that's the bliss body. So there's a lot of good correlations with cannabis and Kundalini. Just use it wisely, don't abuse it. Get the highest quality that you can, because most of the cannabis that people are smoking is really poorly created, pesticide, genetically modified to try to get higher THC, And that's really why all of those type of trips are bad when you're taking Santa Maria cannabis. I mean, all the anxiety, fear that you get from it, it's actually from all the alterations and pesticides that you're smoking or consuming rather than the actual medicine. And so just really want to touch upon that when it comes to managing, especially cannabis can be really helpful to really get you into those meditative states and really help you digest some of these crazy spiritual experiences. So one of the huge things about managing is that you gotta be doing spiritual practice, meditation, journaling, energy cultivation. I mean, whatever type of spiritual practice, going out into nature, working out, sunlight, grounding, like we said before. Those are all really huge. I think especially working on energy cultivation, so stuff like Qigong or Kriya Yoga, anything that, or just like simple meditations like Vipassana, mindfulness meditation, really help this cultivation and movement of Kundalini. And you cannot be not, like, you have to be doing these spiritual practices or die-offs will occur. I mean, this is the huge one for why die-offs occur is because they're not, disciplined, or they're not doing spiritual practices or the specific right energetic cultivation practices. And even furthermore, even after a full Kundalini awakening, like, this is not the end of the process. You have to continue going deeper into yourself, deeper into meditation and energy cultivation so that you can appropriately use the new upgraded system. So practice your spirituality, do the spiritual practices. I mean, I know life is the full spiritual practice, but if you can't take time to do some meditation, if you can't take an hour out of your day to do some type of spiritual practice, then it just shows how much you really think your life is worth. And so, like we touched upon with the guru student, community is huge. So oftentimes during these types of awakenings, the people you used to hang out with no longer match your vibe, and or the wanting for isolation and deep nature will occur. I didn't really talk about this too much in the symptoms, but this is another huge symptom of a Kundalini awakening. You just kind of don't vibe with the same people anymore. You're really wanting that deep nature, that isolation, more into meditative states. And so really finding a community of like-minded people, people in the spiritual space, really can help cultivate this awakening, cultivate your experience, and finding that time to really cultivate that is healthy on all angles, as well as helping this Kundalini awakening. And last thing, I want to really touch upon this, as much as we can have a whole video talk about how to manage this, and we'll have more videos about how to manage it. I want to touch upon this one aspect about this energetic awakening, which is by the grace of God, you only have to reach 51% positively polarized charge to awaken this energy. You only have to reach 51%. In school, that's a failing grade, but you just have to go right above. You have to just tilt your polarization to positivity to fully awaken this energy. I mean, this is really well described in the Law of One through Ra, but this is really what you need to shift into being fourth density. You just have to get your body into unconditional loving relationship with everything to 51%, and then you will experience the full awakening. It will obviously continue to go deeper infinitely, but to upgrade the body, you only have to get to 51%. And I think that's just such a miracle, such a grace by the Creator for that experience. So we talked a lot about the science of Kundalini, especially from the yogic lens, but it really is across all traditions. We're really referencing Kundalini because yoga really has a good science to it. But this transformation has been talked about and recorded through all traditions across the whole world. So I want to touch upon a few of these that I like to reference to show y'all that this is a phenomena in reality. The Taoist tradition refers to the Kundalini snake as a dragon, so they talk a lot more about the mystical dragon experience. And their system of awakening is a lot more like the flowy water than the fiery awakening that Kriya and Kundalini yoga invokes. As this is really about cultivating energy into the dantians, these reservoirs of energy, until they fill up naturally. So naturally filling up these giant pools of water instead of this fiery initiation that Kriya and Kundalini yoga really emphasize. While both both are true in the experience, the Taoists really stay true to that the Kundalini awakens naturally no matter what, just depending on your spiritual practice, your karma, and everything. So just cultivating energy will naturally rise regardless. So in Southern American and Central American cultures, they also refer to the snake or the feathered serpent as this transformational energy within. I mean, we have some ancient cave writings of this snake transforming the body, these yoga positions, and all these verbal traditions being passed down. Even in the Jewish, Islamic, and Christian traditions, we see talks about this energy and the experience of Kundalini. I mean, such as the snake being the animal that moved humans from second density to third density in the Bible, or a really great recorded case from a Christian mystic, Saint Therese of Lisieux, who described her profound inner experience in that mirrors Kundalini awakening. I mean, it's crazy, the one-to-one of her talking about her experience of the Kundalini. And then we also have modern channel texts from stuff like extraterrestrials, like from the Law of One and Ra or Quo, which describe the transformation of energy that one can go through, which moves one from third density consciousness to fourth, to the green ray energy center to the heart, which we've been kind of using the Law of One framework a lot throughout this video, as it's a great framework to understand this energy system and this transformation. So really, it's all about unity consciousness. Kundalini awakening is the energetic upgrade to Christ consciousness. Unity consciousness, the energetic embodiment of self-realization. This is the second coming of Christ, the one that is happening within us all. So living from the heart, with a heart-mind coherence, leading from unconditional love, and the truth of reality. This is the true goal of the Kundalini awakening. This is not some psychic ability thing that you're gaining, but this is just the embodiment, the energetic upgrade in the physical body, the bioneurological upgrade of unity consciousness. As we're transitioning to more of a light body from a chemical body, we are just in this early stages of third density shift to fourth density, from separation consciousness to unity consciousness. And that truly is all that Kundalini awakening is referring to, is just the science of the energetic body upgrading to this. While there's so much more to talk about the Kundalini and the Kundalini awakening, I think this is a really good rounded system to explain kind of the basics and some of the more misunderstood concepts of Kundalini, so that anyone who's going through this process or helping people go through this process, or even had the process and don't fully understand it, gets a little more holistic approach to what this awakening truly means in the modern world. That's it for today's video. Like, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, or topics. And if you have any more questions or topics about this, drop them in the comments and I'll get to it. Thanks for watching. Until next time, peace.